development, I think. There is the move to switch to 35 buildings to energy saving, you know, the fluorescent lamps.
The
You have
thin
the thick one.
Yeah.
Okay, the thick one, which so many people still use, that's 40 watts. But government had a project wherein they will convert 35 buildings into the thinner ones, which is the T5, and that's just 28 watts. So there pa lang. But I think what we really need is, even for government, even for new buildings, I think together with the private sector, there has to be some standards on, kasi for old buildings it's difficult, but for new buildings,
those ones already constructed.
yeah, but I think for new buildings there should be a standard that, you know, all new buildings should have energy saving, energy saving lamps, and not just for lamps. I guess for all other
construction as a whole should have policies geared towards that. But that said, I really have to applaud government at this point, despite all the negative things that's being said about government, because they are trying to push an agenda of being green. At some areas, it can be arguable that they're not doing the right thing, but the intention is there, that they want to make a change. And they're listening to professionals, that they're actually getting consultants from the professional field, whether it be engineers, architects, consultants, whatever. And they are listening. And it's just a matter of people supporting them, because the policy has to come from government. The policy has to be formed by government. We can't have a coherent national strategy when it comes to green building and green strategy if the government is not pushing the agenda. Then the policy has to come from government, and then the private sector has to lift the burden. Like, for example, Philips, government has to set the policy, but companies like Philips and the other companies related to the construction industry, they must take the banner and say, yes, we are leading the charge, and yes, we do support these policies, we want to advocate these things. And personally, I just want to see that people are not negative about this whole thing. So it's easy to be cynical about green buildings. It's easy to say that, parang mahal yan, it'll cost you a lot of money, and at the end of the day, you're not going to feel it. But the negativity is what's killing the whole green thing, because it's really there. The solutions are there. If you want to research it, you want to read books, it's all there. But so it's a trickle-down effect. Government pushes the policy, companies and industries have to follow suit, and the private sector, meaning the consumers, have to support the whole thing.
Okay, so again, it's cooperation, it's teamwork, but the government has to have the advocacy for everybody else to follow.
And I think they do. I think it's there. It's part, like what was mentioned, it's part of their agenda.
Okay.
It's really also educating the public. Yeah. I think we've learned from, you know, Ondoy and all that.
That's true. I was just going to bring that up.
We should learn, you know. If we haven't learned, then that's really sad.
Very sad, very sad.
Yeah.
And speaking of Ondoy and Pepeng, since we still do have a little bit of time on this gap and we're still establishing the problem, you see, Ondoy and Pepeng, if you talk to different people from different sectors or different agencies, they have so many different reasons why we had to experience this after, you know, like 10s and 20s, 30s and 40s and 50s of years. But coming from the two of you, both, you know, with your minds and hearts into going green and environmentally friendly, can you tell us why this happened, and why we should really make a conscious effort to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, why it happened is, I think it's pretty obvious. We just really are reckless when it comes to our environment. You know, like plastics alone. When Ondoy, if you see Ondoy and you see the trash, you know that it's easy to spot. I think I would like to believe that whereas in the past when we've had floods, it did not hurt us, and people said okay. I think Ondoy sent a very strong message, because I think even in Muntinlupa they don't anymore have plastic bags. So, you know, every little action from both the private sector and the government helps. But it does help if there is a cohesive plan.
Yes. Well, I would say that it's sad for me to note that it would take a disaster to make people change or to make people act. But given that that's the situation, that's what we have, and Ondoy should, at least we should pick up something from that disaster or that tragedy, as sad as it was, And what we can pick up from it is that, well, one, things are changing. Whether it be man-made, the climate change thing, whether it be man pushing forward I mean, climate is always changing, but whether man is accelerating it, some are skeptics, but the truth is, you can obviously see something going on. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a genius to know that we are part of the problem, and there are some things that we can or should do that we aren't doing. Whether it comes down to waste management or management of our water resources, or just simply educating people about the right thing to do. We're not doing it.
Yes.
And Ondoy Census, like Nina said, that Ondoy Census, Ria says that Ondoy Census a very clear message of what we must do and what we must start doing right now. And it also gives us a sense of urgency, which is very, very important. That hindi tayo pwedeng mag-antay ng...
Yes.
We don't want another I mean, we don't want another
and we can't really afford another Ondoy because Ondoy itself has already traumatized a lot of people. And those areas that we deemed, quote-unquote, desirable for living and building and potential for many things, when you see the floods up to the second floor, the third floor, nawawala na yung credibilidad. That's totoo lang.
While it's sad, no, it was, Ondoy was a lesson that cut across all classes.
That's right.
It cut across all classes, and I think that's why it was very, again, as I say, it's sad, but it was, in a way, a wake-up call that we are not spared, regardless who you are in society. It hits anyone and everyone, diba?
And along with Ondoy, there were a lot of disasters, different disasters that happened all over the world. So I guess that would only say that the message is not only being sent to the Philippines, but to every other part of the world. Let's take care of our earth. Let's take care of the environment we live in. And if we're not going to cooperate, it's really not going to happen, right?
And the thing is, there's so many beautiful places in the Philippines. Sayang naman, diba? If we don't get to, enjoy these places, diba?
Of course, of course. So, and it is our responsibility, of course, to take care of this for ourselves, for the next generations, and generations after that. So I guess, at least we've established the problem. In a little bit, we'll be talking about the solutions, what we can do, and what we have to do. So don't go away, guys. Opinion Leaders will be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Opinion Leaders, everyone, and still on the topic of being clean, green, and sustainable with architect Dylan and, of course, Ms. Ria. And let's now talk about the advantages of sustainable construction and again, how do we do this? Let's talk about it from the ground up, because I guess many people have questions. Of course, we have lights. We were talking about some construction materials. But if we look at the overview, because you did mention it was a little bit costly, so I guess we should talk about the advantages so it could justify the being costly part.
Right.
I'll start with another. The costly part really isn't that, it isn't that accurate. And the reason why is, there are a lot of solutions which don't cost money. Some solutions do cost money, are expensive, but there are some basic things that can help you out without even spending a lot. And these are real solutions. These are green solutions. For example, having bigger windows, which would mean you would need less lighting in the interior. Those are
even simple things.
Even
like
simple
that.
things, or having cross ventilation, which means that the wind would pass through the interior of the building, making it cooler, and then would make you less reliant on air conditioning for your cooling needs. Those are things that can easily be done. You can easily make your windows bigger, or during the design process, it can easily be integrated inside. But the challenge is to make professionals or designers innovate and think about these things rather than just copy designs from anywhere.
Right.
Especially houses which aren't done here in the Philippines. They like the design, but then they translate it here. It was made for a country with snow, but we're a tropical country,
Yes.
and we need climate adaptive designs. But it's very easy to be in love with, let's say, a French chateau, and then you translate it here, but it doesn't work.
Yes.
And
True.
these are solutions which are not expensive. During the design process or during a renovation process, you can integrate it. But some, yes, it's true that you would look at solutions, for example, like solar technology is still quite expensive at this point. We want it to reach a point, we're hoping that it will reach a point where it's mass-produced, the economies of scale will kick in, and at some point it will become so cheap, it will become accessible. We're not there yet, or probably we're close, or some would, the solar industry would probably say we're there already, but I don't see it on the market at this point. I can't go to Ace Hardware and pick out a really cheap solar setup which I can use to augment my power needs.
Okay.
So until we reach that point where you can grab it from the
shelves,
we're not there yet. That's my argument. Some would say that's not valid, but that's my argument.
Okay. So if you cannot find it as easy as you find accessible as everything else, that's true, because hahanapin mo pa. You're still going to saan ko makukuha ito. And usually, like me, because I'm so impatient, if I cannot find it on the shelves, I will really opt for plan B rather than outsource again, because sometimes we're on time limit, or we have to finish a deadline. Of course, if your client is stressing you out, you got to finish what you got to finish.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, for lighting, it's not really that expensive to switch from incandescent to fluorescent lamps. I think what is important is it's educating the public, and you can buy a CFLI lamp is what, 99, 110 pesos, and an incandescent is 50 pesos. I mean, if you just look at it, one lasts 8 times longer than the other. There pa lang, I don't think
it's actually cheaper.
It is actually cheaper.
And it's brighter, like you did mention.
Yes, and it's very accessible. You can find CFLI lamps everywhere. And some stores, like there are some stores that don't sell any more incandescent lamps.
That's good.
So it also the private sector also has to help in driving this movement. For me, it's a movement na eh. I mean, you really have to create this, and there's a sense of urgency. I think there's a sense of urgency.
Yes. It's great that you went back to that word, because the sense of urgency is what should be. I mean, viewers should be able to watch the show and say, "Oh, tomorrow I'll do something. I will make sure to at least read up on something, or look around my house, look around where I live, my condo, and say, am I really? Can I do something simple? Can I do something that I can easily do in like an hour, and then I will make some change." The sense of urgency has to be not next year, not 10 years from now, or
now, the here and the now.
Tomorrow.
Yes, but usually the good thing, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you start that mindset, that you want to change now, something small, it usually doesn't stop there. What happens is it becomes a lifestyle once again.
Yes.
So it's like lifestyle change. So many people are eating healthy. They're going vegetarian. I mean, well, or at least not eating red meat because it's bad for your health.
So true, yeah.
So if you can compare it, although I know I shouldn't be making comparisons, but to simplify it, sustainable construction is just like doing that. It's just actually integrating certain things, having discipline, having focus, and having the determination to do it and make it a way of life.
Yeah, I would call it creating that culture. A culture where conservation is part of your very, very living. And for adults, it can be quite a challenge, because you're used to a different culture.
Right.
Where if I can pay for it, it's okay to waste it. Diba? Kunyari, for example, mura lang ang bill ko sa tubig, so okay lang kahit magtapon naman. It doesn't mean that if you can afford it, that it's okay.
Right.
Yes.
And that's for adults. But we go to different markets, like the future markets, like children, and you have to create that culture early. Because when they grow up, automatic na sa kanila yun.
They won't even have another option. It's just that.
Yeah, that's what they've come to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like training.
It's like training. And a lot of what training involves is about if you do something wrong, that the culture or the social premise is that everyone will will not like you if you do something wrong.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
Parang
yes.
you will be condemned if, for example, the culture around you is that people segregate trash or people manage their waste, and then ikaw tapon ka lang kung saan. People will probably, or your friends will probably
That's true.
tell you that that's something wrong. But if the culture is wrong, and if your friends are also the same as you throw trash anywhere, okay lang yun. But that's not if you make children grow up with that culture, anyone who's not living up to that standard will immediately get mapapagalitan to have the basic sense of it.
Yeah.
And if you can see also in some countries, like if you travel, diba, and they don't tolerate this, ikaw na mismo mahihiya ka to put anything.
Right.
I mean, even if it's like cutting your own fingernail or something
Right.
like that, and
Right.
it's just something that you would be embarrassed. Like you would have to look around. There's somebody looking at me or something like
Right,
that. But
right.
if you're right, if you're with people who don't care, chances are yung para bang mas maano ka doon,